Welcome to Slashback Cinema, the podcast where we rewind to the glory days of 70s and 80s horror movies. I'm Shawnee Luft.
And I'm Ryan Drymiller.
We miss those iconic, cheesy, classic horror movies from our childhood, from slashers to the supernatural. We're here to rewatch the classics that made us scream or maybe cringe a little and find out if they still pack a punch or just make us laugh or scare the living pants off of us. Ryan, what is our nightmare fuel for today?
Today we're going to review Black Christmas, 1974 Canadian slasher film. This was produced and directed by Bob Clark, who we'll talk about Bob Clark in a minute. I had not seen this one, so I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Whose idea was this movie? I watched this movie on my phone and it was scary. Before we get into it too much, did you look at the poster or watch the trailer for this movie?
Yes, I did see a poster I was going to send to you that I couldn't tell if it was the original or not, but it was horrific. It was so disturbing.
I watched the trailer before the movie because my wife wanted to see if she was interested in watching it. And the trailer and the poster both have the same tagline, which is,
"If this movie doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight."
Which I do not think works at all. My skin is on too tight, but holy crap, this movie, it is really, really disturbing.
Definitely disturbing. And this movie was scary. There's a certain era of horror movies that I haven't watched as much of. 80s, yes, but the early 70s stuff, not as much. So hadn't seen this one. And I was thinking it would be kind of a little jankety and feeling dated, but it was intense, man.
Yes. God, this movie is really scary. I got to tell you, as far as this podcast goes, I was watching this going, whose idea was it to watch this movie? Unfortunately, it was mine. And I did not enjoy watching this movie. It's not a pleasurable experience. This movie really got under my skin.
They really called it the original slasher film. So you see it and you're like, okay, yeah, we were saying that John Carpenter's Halloween was the start. This apparently was the actual start.
Right, and this movie inspired John Carpenter. So let's get into it. You want to summarize the plot a little bit?
Yeah. If you read the IMDb one, it's about as short as it gets.
Yeah.
And I'll just read it verbatim, but we can add some more to it. But it was, during their Christmas break, a group of sorority girls are stalked by a stranger. That's the one line for this movie.
Yeah.
I would just like to add some flavor that it's more than being stalked by the stranger.
Right.
He's straight up killing them all.
Right, one by one.
Yeah, that's basically the premise of the film. I think a lot of the horror of this movie is they have not given you much context or understanding as to why it's happening, or who is doing it, other than these incredibly disturbing phone calls that the sorority girls keep receiving that are progressively not only more gross, but become, it sounded like they had 5 different actors doing the different voices, but the way it manifests, it sort of had that Exorcist vibe of like speaking in different voices, from crying to little boy voice to horrible screams, just guttural noises, animal sounds. That was terrifying. Like each time she picked up the phone and he would start talking, Billy, the psycho killer character, really scary.
Those phone calls were really terrifying. I also didn't realize that if you go watch Scream, that opens with a phone ringing, that this movie was clearly the inspiration for some of those scary phone call. Co-ed girl picks up the phone and is talking to the killer and doesn't realize it.
Totally.
That sequence that opens the first Scream movie is directly taken from this film, which I didn't know anything about this movie. I just knew that it took place at Christmas and it was like one of the first slasher movies. But from the very beginning, and you get this in the trailer as well as in the movie, the sound of the phone ringing is what phones sounded like when we were kids. This movie manages to make that phone ringing sound so creepy and frightening. Like all phones rang exactly the same way.
Yeah.
But when you hear it in this movie, it is just really, really frightening to hear that sound. And you're right. When you hear the killer on the other end of the phone, there's this like incredibly creepy voice.
It seemed like he had multiple personalities. The way he talked, boy. And some of the stuff that they were saying, like, obviously I'm not going to repeat it here. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize movies were so freaking rough back in the 70s.
Yes. Right.
Some of the things he was saying to the girls, wow.
It was really gross. So that when the girls were freaked out by him, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty freaked out by him as well. That I would actually leave the house if somebody called me and said those things. It takes place in this sorority house, and there's like this den mother that lives with them.
Yeah, it was Miss Mac, her character. She was this wacky drunk, kind of add a little bit of humor to the scenes, and a little bit of lightness, but there wasn't much of that in this movie.
She's like the den mother from Annie. Maybe not like Annie in the sense that this woman seems to actually care about these girls, but she's also kind of a little incompetent and a little fake. Like
running a loose ship there. That's right.
So over the course of the movie, there's two things about it I found really interesting. One is the subplot with the last girl, right? A lot of these slasher movies have like one girl that survives to the end. And so maybe that starts with Black Christmas because it's the oldest movie I've seen that has this theme in it. And she actually has kind of an interesting storyline where she's got a boyfriend and she's gotten pregnant and she wants to have an abortion. And she's like openly talking about it in the movie, which I think it's like 1 year after abortion became legal in the United States. So it was fascinating to me that she's like openly talking about it. So she wants to have an abortion, and then her boyfriend reacts very aggressively to that. And he says things like, you're not giving me a say, and you're just going to kill a baby. I was just amazed that this movie just put that kind of debate on screen in 1974.
Definitely a bit of a feminist slant pushing that forward with her making the choice and making that decision. Clearly this guy doesn't like it. And then it does call into question later, what are his motives or true intentions? How crazy is he? Like, is he actually crazy enough to be the killer?
Then that's the other thing that surprised me is it kind of plays out almost like a murder mystery, which, so you're like trying to figure out who is the guy on the phone. You get these phone calls throughout the movie, and you hear the killer on the phone kind of taunting and saying these horrible things and sounding psychotic. You just see it from the girl's perspective. And so you are kind of led to believe, or like I assumed that the killer must be this girl's boyfriend.
Right.
And that's clearly what the movie wants you to think.
Well, also on those calls, he's dropping bits of information or repeating things that only that other person who had been part of that conversation, the Billy character, serial killer, is mimicking back lines that were shared. So equally unnerving, or pointing the finger to the boyfriend that how could anyone else know but him?
He says something like, you're going to remove it like a wart or something like that. The boyfriend says that line when they're debating what to do about the pregnancy. And then the killer on the phone basically says that. But he's using so many different voices and sounds that you can't tell if it's the same character, but you think, well, it must be that guy because he's repeating back some of the things that the boyfriend said.
The way they show this killer, it's that first person perspective. So you're seeing the killer's hands as he moves down the ladder, creeping up into the building. They don't really show him at all other than a cast shadow or in that one scene with you see his eye. Like, he's sort of invisible to the movie, obviously a presence, but the most recognizable piece of him is his voice over the phone in these conversations he's having with the girls.
The other thing about the movie that I actually was happy to see was Margot Kidder. Did you know she was going to be in this movie?
No. I mean, what a cast. Olivia Hussey, who played Jess, who had been in Romeo and Juliet. And then, Lois Lane was in here. And that guy, John Saxon, he was in so many 70s and 80s films. I wouldn't have known his name, but you've seen him like show up in so many movies.
Right.
I was surprised how many actors and actresses I actually knew.
Saxon was in Wes Craven's New Nightmare and From Dawn to Dusk, so he had horror movie credentials, or not just in this movie, but throughout his career. I think he has kind of a creepy face. Even if you go to his Wikipedia page and look at the headshot of him, it's a creepy headshot. That's a creepy looking dude. Yeah. He should be the killer in more movies.
Yeah, he's got the eyebrows for it.
Right, and the creepy smile. So, I got a kick out of Margot Kidder. She plays drunk co-ed in the movie.
Drunk to the point of, I think they go to the police station and they're trying to report the calls, and the deputy doesn't take them seriously at all and kind of blowing them off. And she's there getting in his face, and then she's cracking a beer at the police station.
Yes. You could tell some of these people are not going to make it based on their moral character. And then there's also a big twist, which is also an urban legend. We talked in the last episode that there was this urban legend of guy climbs down chimney and gets his neck broken and stuck in the chimney.
Yeah.
This movie, Black Christmas, also has an urban legend.
It's the serial killer call coming from the house.
There's a couple parts of this movie that I genuinely wondered if they made any sense at all. Like, is there a second phone line in this house that he's calling from in the attic?
They did allude to, when the police came out, they were going to tap the phones. They were like, how many phones do you have? They're like, oh, we have 2. But then there's also one in Miss Mac's room. But that's another line that we don't use. So that's where I thought the calls were coming from. This guy was going into her room.
Okay. But then when you hear the guy talking on the phone, he's practically screaming. He's making so much noise, making piggy noises and making a racket. You can't hear the guy on the phone in this house. I feel like in the comedy version of this movie, they just walk upstairs and open the door and he's standing there making piggy screechy noises in the phone. Like, dude, you're making a racket. So there's that part of it that I was
Excellent
like, how
point.
can you not hear a guy making such a commotion?
At the beginning of the movie, when the first girl gets killed and Billy, the serial killer, takes her out, he basically takes a plastic wrap sheet for when you get your clothes laundered, and he basically suffocates this girl with the bag. For the longest time, and maybe I just missed it, I thought he had killed her and left her in the room, and then they're out there looking for her, hurting her, missing it. Later, they show that he's actually taken her up to the attic, and that's where he's collecting all of his kills up there. But there was a good 20 minutes in the movie that I was sort of scratching my head like, this is some sloppy police work. They're like scouring every inch of the park. And I'm thinking, well, just have you looked in her room?
The other thing about the movie that I found fascinating was it's not a super bloody movie, right? When you go back and look at like the movies it inspired, like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, or Halloween even, those movies, there's a lot more knives and eyeballs and heads and body parts, and there's a lot more gore in the movies this inspired. This movie, it has kind of like a more 1960s Psycho vibe, where you see the killer holding a knife or a piece of glass, and you see the hand come down, and then it cuts to the girl screaming, and that's how you know the person died. Or they'll show the person dead, and there'll be like a little bit of blood around the neck, and I'm just not, they haven't cut through the head. It's just like they threw a little paint on the guy's neck.
But a scratch. It didn't look like Monty Python blood. It was sort of like hot pink and low special effects budget for this one.
But for not showing any of that, it is really scary.
It creates a lot of terror around the tension that it builds, the way that the phone calls happen, and then these creeping, lurking, stalking sequences, and then the murder scenes are quite disturbing. They don't show a lot, but what's implied, very unnerving.
So at the end of the movie, like I said, I thought it was playing out kind of like a murder mystery where the detectives are trying to figure out who it is, and at a certain point you figure out, oh, it might be the boyfriend, and the characters think it might be the boyfriend. It turns out it's not the boyfriend.
No, but she kills the boyfriend.
Can you explain this to me? What happens at the end of this movie? I was confused by that.
The police rush in. They hear screaming from the house. They realize that the killer is in the house. So that's that race against time. And then when they get there, they hear a scream. They rush in, go to the basement, and then they find the main character, Jess, with her boyfriend on top. And they're both covered in blood. And she wakes up, but she's killed her boyfriend because she thought he was the killer.
Okay, so she's unconscious, and then the police take her. She wakes up, and I guess the police interpret this to mean that she must have killed the killer. And then, like, nice police work, everybody. We've done it again. Let's give ourselves a raise.
Yeah. They're like patting themselves on the back. She's, I guess, drugged out. Like they gave her some drugs or something. So she's asleep in the bed. And then inexplicably, the police, rather than stay there with her, they turn off the lights and they leave the house.
Yes.
Good to go.
Case closed. And then over the closing credits, I thought this was pretty good, pretty creepy. A phone starts to ring. And that's just how it ends. As the credits are rolling, you just hear this phone ringing over and over again. And then it just fades. Wow, that is a very troubling, disturbing, uncomfortable way to end this movie.
Definitely a disturbing film. Any standout scenes to you?
The phone calls that we talked about were definitely the most unnerving thing I've seen in a movie in a long time. This movie is 50 years old. And I think this year, because it came out in 74.
74, yeah.
And those phone calls are still surprisingly upsetting. Like this movie, we talked about Gremlins and how it's a great horror movie for 12-year-olds. I would not let a 12-year-old watch this movie. I don't even want to watch it again. And I'm as old as this movie. I will not be rewatching Black Christmas.
One and done.
So those phone calls stand out for me as the scene that upset me the most. With those phone calls, do you ever really find out why is the killer doing different voices and making piggy noises? Is any of that clear in this movie?
No, I think that's part of the terror of this film. They show you so little. They don't give you any motivation. There's no backstory for that character. He manifests as these terrifying phone calls. He shows up killing people. And then the only other scene that also just kind of layered onto how creepy this character was was when he's in the ag and he just starts freaking out. He's like smashing into everything and making all these guttural beast noises. It just paints this picture of this really scary individual that seems mentally disturbed and dangerous, but you don't know anything else.
The movie leaves it open-ended enough that you're really not sure exactly what's happening. It feels a little bit like this period of time between the 60s and the 70s. There's a lot of focus in the news on serial killers, and every serial killer has like a different stupid name that the newspapers give them. And this movie seems inspired by that kind of creepy, horrifying serial killer.
Don't trust the stranger. Lock your doors at night.
Right. Who's just taking pleasure in murdering people and then taunting the police or something. The Zodiac Killer. It's like stuff like that. This movie is like that kind of horror movie.
Well, you're talking about inspiring Scream. Seems like there's some of the vibes from this movie carried over to Silence of the Lambs with that one killer that's like creating skins and the way he talks. Just like it had that kind of flavor to it. Just really a portrait of somebody who's very disturbed and almost subhuman in the way they're manifesting.
So you didn't say a favorite scene or a standout scene.
Yeah, there were two. One was that really trippy murder scene. It was with Barb, Margot Kidder's character. When she gets taken out, he kind of keeps coming into the room or sneaking into the room. It gets interrupted, but ultimately he comes into the room and she's got this weird setup in her room with all these glass sculptures above her bed, which seems like a terrible idea anyway, but he winds up taking her out by stabbing her. Yeah. But the way they shot it was super trippy. It was, like you were saying, not as heavy with the gore, but the way the blade was coming down, the way it was filmed, that captured the light, it was very surreal the way they shot that. The other scene that stood out to me was the sequence when Jess runs upstairs, finds her two friends dead in the room, and then realizes the guy is in the room, and then you see his eye through the crack in the door there. Bloody red eye. That's the only time you see him. Like, you see that eye, whose eye is that? And then she slams the door on him and then runs away. But they have that intense chase scene through the house, goes into the basement. She locks the door. He's banging out the door. So intense. And then you can hear him just walk off. And then she's standing there. And then you start seeing this figure creeping around in the basement windows, like through this silhouette that gets distorted. And that's when the boyfriend comes in. So she's for sure thinking it's him. That whole scene was terrifying.
Let's talk about the director for a second. Bob Clark. Did you look up anything about... I'm fascinated by this guy.
Yeah, Bob Clark of Christmas Story fame.
Yeah,
and
this
Porkys.
guy's... yeah, exactly. This guy's like range of movies. So Black Christmas comes out in 1974. Then he makes Porkys in 1981, which is just like a monster hit in terms of like cost. For the budget of Porkys was $4 million and it made $160 million. So it was like the original American Pie teen sex comedy movie. And then he made A Christmas Story, which is that warm Christmas movie with the lamp and the BB gun and the kids sticking their tongues on light posts. Like, Bob Clark really has quite a range, and he has given a lot to Christmas.
He really ran the gamut, and I guess a lot of directors do that, where they start in horror and sometimes move on.
Right,
like Peter Jackson, we've talked about, to produce much bigger films that are totally different.
Yeah,
genres.
That's true.
But I was really surprised. I was thinking this was sort of an obscure, no-name director, but no, Bob Clark, Christmas Story.
Black Christmas was really influential. I read that there was like direct influence between Black Christmas and Halloween.
Yeah, you could see that. It is interesting to have this set on Christmas. It's a totally different table setting and dressing versus Halloween. You can go dark on Halloween because that's what we're going to be really into. You set a horror movie in Christmas, you're really creating a whole different feeling and stage for what happens, especially with a slasher film where you're taking something kind of wholesome and warm, and it's supposed to be all about family, and then you're doing these horrible things are happening. It's very different than when you say, oh, it's Halloween and these horrible things are happening on Halloween.
Right. This is like the original Christmas horror movie. And the movie leans into that, like you said, with all of the set dressing. But also there's a scene of carolers where they show the kids singing.
And Jess comes to the door to appreciate their caroling. And they do one song, but then they keep going. They're like, next song. And then she's like, okay, somebody's killing everyone, but I'll keep listening to the holiday classics here.
The movie manages to squeeze a lot of discomfort out of the idea of Christmas.
Well, that caroler scene, it did make me wonder if they were riffing on that for Gremlins, because they've got that caroling scene too.
All right, so what's your stabby score?
Oh man, I went back and forth in this one too. Man, I feel like I'm indecisive these days, but honestly was surprised how scary this movie was. I figured it would come across as sort of like a period of time and kind of be a little bit of the exploitation space. I'd give it 4 stabs.
Wow.
Like you said, I don't know that I would watch this movie again. One time was enough, but I thought it was truly scary. I thought it was very original in the way that they created this killer that they don't give you much information on. It's like it's seen through shadows. It's through a voice. So they paint this picture of someone who's truly disturbed without really giving you a lot. The way it builds the tension, some of the things we talked about in terms of this being the first movie where it's the last girl standing, I thought it was pretty good.
Oh, that's interesting. So this is a place where you and I have a different interpretation of the stabby score, because I'm giving this movie 2 stabs.
Ooh.
Ouch. Everything you said about it is right. I feel like it is clearly iconic. It is super influential. As a 50-year-old movie, it still holds up. It came out, by the way, December 20th, 1974. So it's almost been exactly 50 years since the movie came out. It's definitely due for a retrospective, although I found it unpleasurable to watch. Like, the movies that I give 5 stabbies to are movies that I enjoyed enough that I would I'll watch this again every year. This is a movie I would recommend to friends and really enjoyed watching. Those are the 5 stabby movies. But this movie, for all that could be said about it and for as influential as it is, and if you like the movie Halloween or Friday the 13th, I would definitely recommend you watch this movie. But I did not enjoy this movie at all. And I gotta say, the trailer of the movie I actually thought was scarier than the movie. When I saw the trailer, holy crap, the 2-minute trailer scared me so much. I don't know if I could see this movie. So I watched a bunch of it on my phone to make the screen as little as possible, because I had to watch it for the podcast. I enjoyed seeing Margot Kidder up on the screen again. I miss her Lois Lane, but I was so disturbed by the villain in this movie. I was so disturbed by those phone calls. I found myself grateful for the fact that it wasn't more bloody, that it was more suggestive, but it was so disturbing and so troubling and upsetting. I don't think I'll ever watch this movie again. And I got so little joy out of watching it. 2 stabbies for me.
Okay. But that is a great point, because my lens on this is the appreciation for just how well it was done in that genre. For obviously it being so original and laid the groundwork for a lot of the films that came later. Yeah. I will say that slasher films in general are not my favorite form of horror movie, but just stepping back and saying, what is this film from a critical impact perspective? I'm going to stick with my 4 stabs. But if I had to say, is this a movie that I personally love and would serve up as a Friday night film for the family, this would not be that film.
Did you watch Black Christmas with your family like you did Gremlins and some of the other ones?
No, I showed Jen the trailer, and she was like, "Oh, hell no."
Yeah, that's what my wife said.
So I watched it on my laptop downstairs quietly and had to turn it down. All the screaming parts were happening.
Yeah,
I got banned to the basement for this one.
The other thing I'll say about this movie is I had to watch it during the day. I didn't want to watch it at night. I'm a 50-year-old man, and I was scared by this movie, genuinely really frightened. And so instead I watched it Sunday morning in full daylight on my phone. So to kind of dampen the terror.
So I watched it right before bed. It was kind of on the later side, and I'm laying in bed and I'm running all those different scenes through my head and thinking, boy, is there something wrong with me and us that we decided that we want to watch these movies and then talk about them? And
I got to say, I looked up who recommended this movie.
This was yours.
God, it was me. Yes, I recommended this movie.
The caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house.
I wanted to see a first Christmas horror movie, and yes, I have no one to blame but myself.
It was a true Christmas miracle and gift to yourself, Shawnee.
So pass. I feel like we've given listeners enough information that they can now decide for themselves, because it really depends on what kind of horror movie you like.
Yeah.
And it's definitely well done. Everything we've said, it genuinely is really scary 50 years later, which is pretty impressive.
I mean, compared to The Omen,
Yes.
We talked about The Omen. Time has not treated that movie as well. I think this really was still pretty sharp.
It really holds up, yeah. And there have been a couple of sequels. I mean, Black Christmas is a great name, and so there have been remakes in 2006, 2019. I haven't seen any of them. Would you be interested in going to see some of that stuff, like modern interpretations?
Nah, I'm good.
Curious.
I'm good.
Okay.
Because I bet you it's this, plus they just take it to like a Saw place. I mean, maybe we should give it a shot, but maybe we should watch the trailer.
Clearly, there's like an audience for this stuff.
Yeah, probably not us.
Also, what is wrong with you if this is the kind of thing you get pleasure from?
you sicko.
So we may make ourselves watch more of these, but I want the audience to know we are doing it for you people. We are giving ourselves nightmares.
All in the spirit of service.
For yes.
Everything for the art.
You're welcome.
Nightmare fuel.
Thank you for listening to Slashback Cinema. If you've seen Black Christmas, I would genuinely love to hear from anybody who either hated this film or loved this film and what you loved about it. I'd be curious if anybody watched it when they were kids, and what have been your therapy bills since then?
Yeah, and is this in holiday rotation? Do you watch this every year? It's like Christmas Story and then Black Christmas back to back. Like, we want to talk to you.
Can you imagine watching like a Bob Clark film festival where it's Black Christmas and then a Christmas Story and then Porkys? Kind of effed up film festival is this?
Yeah, probably one we'd go to.
Yeah, probably. All right, go to slashbackcinema.com. Check us out on Instagram, on TikTok. Ryan has done a great job making art and little inspired images from these movies and from our conversations. So come check us out and let us know what you thought of this episode.
Thanks for listening.